Some books are born in silence. Others are delivered with fire. But once in 1,000 lifetimes, something arrives that doesn't come from printing presses or poetic minds. It arrives the way thunder arrives before the storm. Sudden, unannounced, intimate. I didn't find a book. It found me. It didn't shout, it waited. Like a presence in the room, not a stranger, but something that had been watching me since before I could name myself. There were no reviews. No author's face smiling from a back flap. There were no blurbs, no endorsements, no promises. Only a thick, blue cover. A title that felt more like a sound than a word. Urantia. When I opened it, something opened in me. It wasn't information. It was recognition. I wasn't reading. I was remembering. Every page echoed like a long-forgotten dream that was mine but never told. Every sentence felt like a map drawn with invisible ink, now revealed under the warmth of some inner flame. And then the voice, not out loud, but unmistakable. You've read this before, not with your eyes, but with your soul. I stopped reading, but the book didn't stop speaking. They say truth doesn't arrive. It awakens. They say memory isn't a storage, it's a door. Urantia isn't a religion. It doesn't ask to be worshipped. It doesn't care what you believe. It whispers the kind of truth that doesn't argue. It resonates. If you've ever felt like you came from somewhere else, if you've ever wept for a home you can't name, if you've ever heard a silence that sounded like love, then you already know what's inside this book, because it's inside you. It speaks of a universe alive, breathing, spiraling, singing, of galaxies organized not by chaos, but by love, of spiritual families, of divine architects, of rebel princes and planetary quarantine, of a creator son, one who became man not to dominate, but to understand. This is not myth. It's memory wearing language. And if you're still here reading, perhaps you're not seeking something new. Perhaps you're returning to something ancient, to something real, to yourself. Welcome to Urantia. This is the story of where you came from, why you're here, and how to find your way back. Before we begin this journey, I ask you for one thing. Stay present. Let this text meet you where you are. And if you feel something stir inside, like a flame quietly remembering its source, don't ignore it. That's not imagination. That's the voice of your origin. And if this resonates with you, take a moment now to like this video, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell for future content, and comment below where you're watching from. Your presence here isn't an accident, and what comes next might just shift everything. Chapter 1. The book that wasn't written. It wasn't a Sunday morning. There were no candles, no cathedrals, no incense. I wasn't looking for enlightenment. I was looking for silence. And that's where it began, in a silence so complete it became a sound. I found the book resting on a table no one remembered placing it on. No inscription, no explanation, just presence. There was something disobedient about it. It didn't beg for attention. It emanated it. The cover felt dense, like it carried weight not of paper, but of purpose. The word on it, Urantia, pulsed with a subtle force. As I turned the pages, the structure wasn't narrative. It wasn't a story told from beginning to end. It was architectural, layered, coded. It felt like stepping into a temple without walls. Not built with bricks, but with principles, living truths suspended in language. And then came the recognition, the soul's quiet nod. This is not the first time you've held this knowledge. You just forgot where you placed it. These words didn't come from the book. They came from within me as I read it. The first time I heard of the concept of divine memory, it was through Paramahansa Yogananda. He wrote, "Realize deeply that the present moment is all you ever have. Make the now the primary focus of your life." But what if the present moment isn't a dot on a timeline, but a door to all that was ever known? Urantia did not give me new beliefs. It reopened what silence had been guarding. The book did not preach. It revealed. It told me that God was not male or female, that the universe was not random or chaotic. That Earth, Urantia, was not forgotten. We had been quarantined, not because we were evil, but because once, long ago, a radiant being chose disconnection over communion. This wasn't punishment. It was containment. And it made sense. Why so many mystics feel homesick. Why lightworkers dream of stars they can't name. Why seekers all whisper the same unspoken longing. I'm not from here, but I'm needed here. The deeper I read, the more I remembered. About a creator son who walked this earth. About his gentle silence. About his sovereignty, not through control, but through compassion. God dwells in you, as you, and you are never apart from him, said Ramana Maharshi. Realize that your very presence is his proof. Urantia didn't try to convert me. It did something more dangerous. It woke me up. There's a moment in every seeker's life when information stops being interesting and starts becoming unbearable. Not because it is wrong, but because it is incomplete. That was me. I had read scriptures, sat in temples, listened to monks and mystics, and yet nothing struck like this did. Urantia didn't explain God. It located him, not up there, not out there, but in each human longing, in each act of silent courage, in the grain of the infinite woven through the finite. The book described the universe not as an accident, but as a living organism, a divine architecture pulsing with meaning. At its center was the paradise isle, the unmoving point from which all time and space unfold. Surrounding it, a vast array of concentric realities, layers of administration, hierarchy, and love. It was a mythology. It was precision. It didn't conflict with science. It transcended it. As Plotinus once wrote in his Enneads, the soul loves to ascend, not away from the world, but through it toward the origin of all origins. Urantia gave that ascent a framework. Each page held the echo of a map, not the kind drawn in ink, but in memory. The book spoke of creator sons, beings of unimaginable authority and tenderness, who choose to embody the worlds they create. It spoke of one such being, Michael of Nebadon, who incarnated here, not as a god hidden behind miracles, but as a man willing to be misunderstood, betrayed, and broken. God became man so that man might realize he was never separate from God. Whispered echoes of Meister Eckhart. And that man was Jesus. Not just the Jesus of religion, but the Jesus of the stars. A sovereign creator son who walked this earth not to impose his power, but to experience our vulnerability. He chose this world, Urantia, because we're not perfect. He came because we were in exile. He came to restore the link, not through command, but through companionship. I remember closing the book and just staring at the wall. I wasn't shaken. I was reconfigured. The book had not entered me. It had extracted me from the illusions I had mistaken for truth. In a single breath, I understood what sages meant when they spoke of awakening. Not a thunderclap, not fireworks, but a shift subtle and seismic. As the Tao Te Ching teaches, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Urantia never claimed to name the unnameable. It simply created silence where the unnameable could speak. The final pages I read that night didn't feel like an ending. They felt like a door. Not a door into dogma, but into devotion. Not worship as submission, but as remembrance. You are not a drop in the ocean, said Rumi. You are the entire ocean in a drop. And with that, I realized this wasn't a book. It was a mirror, and in it, I saw the faint outline of my own forgotten face. Chapter 2. The Universe That Breathes. What if the universe isn't random? What if the stars don't just burn, but pray? What if galaxies are not the byproduct of chaos, but the choreography of intelligence older than time? The Urantia Book does not suggest this as poetry. It describes it as structure, not cold and rigid, but alive and precise. A sacred architecture, a design so complex it feels like music slowed down into matter. At the heart of everything, it says, is paradise, not a place of clouds and harps, but a still, radiant center from which all reality emanates. Not a metaphor, not a parable, a literal point of divine origin. From paradise flow three deities, the universal Father, the eternal Son, and the infinite Spirit, from whom all creation unfolds, like ripples from a single, eternal breath. The book describes the master universe like a grand, celestial mandala, concentric zones of creation spiraling outward, ordered, layered, living. At its center is Havona, the eternal and perfect core, home to divine beings beyond comprehension. Surrounding it are the 7 super-universes, each containing billions of galaxies and inhabited worlds. And we, here on Earth, or as they call it, Urantia, belong to one of these outer fringes. This was not a cosmology of conquest. It was one of communion. As Swami Vivekananda once said, the goal is to manifest the divinity already within us and to see it in all beings. Urantia's map of the universe doesn't place God above us. It shows divinity woven through every level of existence, from paradise down to the atoms of your fingertips. It redefines power, not as dominance, but as design, not as control, but as connectivity. Even the so-called administration of the universe is not described as hierarchy for command, but as an ecosystem of love and order. Myriads of spiritual beings, administrators, guides, messengers, are not ruling from thrones, but serving through awareness. Not unlike what the Bhagavad Gita tells us. The wise see with equal vision a priest, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater. In the eyes of paradise, no being is lesser. Some are simply further along the spiral of realization. What makes Urantia's view unique is its absence of superstition. There are no magical shortcuts, no chosen races, no predestined elites. There's only growth, from imperfection toward divine assimilation. There is path, not privilege, and that is revolutionary. Because if we're not cursed, not fallen, not defective, but simply unfinished, then our very existence is the process of God evolving through us. In that sense, the universe doesn't just breathe, it breathes us. To know where you are, you must first remember what you are. Urantia, this earth, is not a mistake. It is not forgotten. It is one of trillions of inhabited worlds orbiting the divine in ever-widening spirals of consciousness. Not central, not irrelevant. Simply placed at the edge of something vast and holy. Like a seed dropped gently into darkness, not to be lost, but to germinate. The Urantia Book doesn't elevate our world through flattery. It invites us into humility. We are not the crown of creation. We are its children, young, impulsive, luminous with potential. You are not the body. You are the light within it, said the great Sufi poet Rumi. And the light does not fear the night. Urantia was seeded with possibility. And so are you. In this universe that breathes, every being ascends. There is no stagnation in divine design, only movement, return, remembering. From the mortal experience of trial and time, the soul begins its long spiral inward, through countless worlds dimensions, and stages of being, until it stands in the presence of the original source, not as a stranger, but as a fully realized extension of that source. This is what the Eastern mystics called moksha, liberation. What Christian mystics named union with God. What the Urantia Book calls fusion with the thought adjuster, the indwelling fragment of the Universal Father. And yet, in the silence between these vast cosmic truths, there's a quieter question. Why does it matter to know this now? Why should a soul anchored in daily struggle care about super universes and paradise centers? Because the design is not just above you, it is within you. Every time you choose compassion over anger, you realign with the universal current. Every time you forgive, you mirror the function of divine mind. Every act of awareness is a small resurrection, lifting you up the spiral one breath at a time. Lao Tzu wrote in the Tao Te Ching, knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. The map of the cosmos is not about mastering galaxies. It's about mastering the gravity of your own forgetfulness. Urantia teaches us that the kingdom of God is not a place we reach. It's a reality we awaken into. The universe is built to receive you, but not the version of you that has been built from fear, achievement, or identity. It waits for the one hidden behind all that, the one you have always been, the soul seated with divine origin and drawn by divine gravity. And so we walk, not in straight lines, but in spirals. We fall and rise, forget and remember, hurt and heal. And each turn of the spiral brings us closer to the silent center, not above the stars, but beneath the illusion of separation. When you close your eyes and feel that stillness, when you sense that there is more, even if you cannot name it, when your soul aches not for more, but for home, that is the universe breathing through you. That is paradise calling you back, not with commands, not with threats, with a whisper. Come as you are, it says. You've never truly left. Chapter 3, The Rebellion of Light. Not all darkness begins in shadows. Some begins in brilliance. When light forgets, it is light. According to the Urantia Book, long before the rise of civilizations, long before Earth even bore human life, a rebellion shook a portion of the universe. Not a war of weapons, but of wills. Not chaos from below, but disobedience from above. The one who led it was called Lucifer, but not the horned caricature of medieval fears. Lucifer was a brilliant being, a Lannan son, a high administrator, entrusted with the oversight of a planetary system. He was noble, he was wise, and yet something within him turned inward. The ego is the voice that believes you are separate, said Helen Schuckman in A Course in Miracles. It speaks first, it speaks loudest, and it is always wrong. Lucifer's rebellion was not a tantrum. It was a manifesto. He began to teach that the universe's governance was unnecessary, that the Father's authority was a restriction, that free will should be absolute, even if it meant disconnection. And like every seductive lie, it was wrapped in half-truths. Freedom is sacred, but freedom without communion becomes isolation. Lucifer sowed his ideology among 37 planets in his system. He gained allies. He distorted trust. He planted doubt. And when he could no longer bend the universe to his mind, he bent minds to his voice. Our planet, Urantia, was one of those affected. Not because we rebelled, but because our planetary prince, Caligastia, did. He aligned himself with Lucifer's declaration of independence. The result? A planetary quarantine, a kind of spiritual lockdown in which circuits of communication were severed between Earth and the wider universe. It wasn't punishment, it was containment, to prevent the infection of separation from spreading further. This is why, for millennia, we have felt alone. Why mystics reach for stars they cannot touch. Why prophets cry out and hear only echoes. Not because God is far, but because we have been temporarily placed behind a veil for healing. As the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas says, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Lucifer did not bring forth what was whole. He externalized fragmentation. And we, as a planetary family, inherited the tremor of that fracture. But there's something the Urantia Book makes profoundly clear. God does not retaliate. There is no divine wrath, no vengeance from the heavens, only the quiet, eternal effort to restore harmony. And while Lucifer is no longer in power, and his adjudication is already unfolding in higher realms, the reverberation of his rebellion still lingers in our collective psyche. Every time we idolize the ego, every time we worship control over connection, every time we confuse independence with isolation, we repeat a small version of that ancient echo. The fall is not a historical event, wrote the theologian Teilhard de Chardin. It is the ever-renewed choice between love and self. And so, Earth spins on, not cursed but invited, not abandoned but watched. The universe does not fear our darkness. It simply waits for our return to light. In the wake of rebellion, the universe did not erupt in flames. It inhaled, it paused, it preserved what could still be saved. One of the most humbling revelations from the Urantia Book is this. God does not react as humans do. Where we retaliate, he reorients. Where we condemn, he redeems. The universal Father, surrounded by eternal perfection, did not smite the rebels. He allowed free will its consequence, but he never withdrew his presence. This is not a myth of divine punishment. It is the anatomy of spiritual cause and effect, cosmic law, not cosmic revenge. As the Dhammapada teaches, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal law. So the systems infected by rebellion were placed in spiritual isolation, not as exile, but as a healing chamber, like cells quarantined so that the body may survive. And Earth, our dear Urantia, became a planet in spiritual lockdown. This is why no celestial messages reached us unfiltered. Why prophets came and were misunderstood. Why saviors came and were crucified. We were not silenced. We were protected from misusing a voice we had not yet learned to wield with wisdom. But the divine did not abandon us. Within each human being, God embedded a seed, a fragment of himself. The Urantia Book calls it the thought adjuster. Other traditions call it the Atman, the inner Christ, the Buddha nature. The kingdom of God is within you, said Jesus, not as metaphor, but as metaphysics. This indwelling presence remains untouched by rebellion. It is the silent navigator, the original light, the still, small voice guiding us back to integration. While celestial circuits were broken, this inner compass stayed online. You could block it, deny it, ignore it, but you could not lose it, because it is not something you possess. It is what you are when all else is quieted. Even amidst planetary confusion, spiritual evolution did not stop. In fact, the very tension created by separation intensified the soul's hunger for return. Mystics across all cultures began to speak of longing, not just for God, but for a home no map could point to. This longing is not weakness. It is gravitational memory. It is the universe within you remembering its shape. And like all gravitational forces, it pulls us inward, not into isolation, but into union. In his spiritual canticle, St. John of the Cross wrote, "Where have you hidden, beloved, and left me moaning? You fled like the stag, having wounded me. I went out calling you, and you were gone. That cry, ancient, holy, unresolved, is not unique to mystics. It is the echo of the planetary soul calling for reconnection. And the answer has always been whispering back. You were never abandoned. You are still connected by light that no rebellion can extinguish. The Urantia Book makes it clear. The rebellion, though tragic, was not the end of our story. The divine response is never finality. It is always preparation for restoration. And even before the rebellion was fully judged, even before circuits reopened, a plan had already been set in motion. One day, a Creator Son would descend. He would come not to punish, but to walk among us. He would not demand allegiance. He would embody oneness. And through his life, Urantia would be marked forever, not as the planet that fell, but as the one that would become the very ground of divine revelation. But that story belongs to the next chapter. Chapter 4, The Veiled Planet. There are worlds where angels walk openly, where divine circuits pulse like golden rivers between systems, where communication with the divine is not prayer, but dialogue. Earth is not one of those worlds. We live in a veiled realm, a planet behind a curtain that few even know exists. Not cursed, not forsaken, simply quarantined. According to the Urantia Book, when the Lucifer rebellion erupted, 37 worlds fell under the shadow of disconnection. Ours, Urantia, was one of them. And of those, ours became ground zero for redemption, precisely because it became the most isolated. The circuits that once connected us to the rest of the universe, circuits of knowledge, energy, guidance, were cut off to stop the ideological infection from spreading. Like a spiritual firewall, a cosmic silence. In the middle of the journey of our life, I found myself in a dark wood, for the straight path had been lost. Dante Alighieri, The Divine Comedy. It is not only poets who have felt this darkness. For millennia, mystics, shamans, sages, and saints have spoken of this holy loneliness, the aching sense that something essential is missing from the human experience. We long for contact, not with gods who demand worship, but with something that remembers us as we truly are. The veil has shaped everything. It is why humanity struggles to believe in its own divinity. Why dogma so often replaced direct experience. Why religions evolved into systems of control instead of schools of awakening. Because when outer contact is broken, the only way back is inward. And in that silent place within, God waits. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46, verse 10. Stillness is not passivity. It is the language of the veiled. Earth's spiritual history is one of remnants and whispers, fragmentary revelations, partial truths, sacred misinterpretations. One prophet glimpsed the mountain. Another touched the cloud. Another heard the thunder, but missed the voice inside it. None of them were wrong, but none had the whole picture, because the circuits were still closed. Imagine a child growing up in a sealed room, with only fragments of letters from a distant family. The child is not unloved. The room is not punishment. It is protection until the child can read the letters not just with the eyes, but with the heart. This is Urantia. This is us. The seeker is he who has realized that what he has been told is not enough. Nisargadatta Maharaj. And that seeking, though painful, has become our sacred inheritance. For in absence, longing becomes a compass. There is a strange paradox hidden in the story of Urantia. We are one of the most isolated planets in the universe. Yet we are also one of the most spiritually significant. The Urantia Book does not flatter humanity. It challenges us. It calls us out of the illusion that we are alone for no reason. It shows us that the veil is not just a condition, it is a classroom. Here, on this planet, spiritual evolution is not handed to us. It is carved, wrestled, forged in the friction between ignorance and insight, between forgetfulness and flashes of remembrance. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, wrote Carl Jung. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But Earth doesn't let us avoid that confrontation. Not for long. Pain is not glorified here, but it is utilized. Confusion is not praised, but it is permitted because it becomes a mirror for what matters. In a universe where many beings progress with clarity and guidance, humans evolve through the alchemy of contrast. We learn what God is by living without certainty. We learn what love is by witnessing its absence. We learn who we are by losing ourselves and then noticing what remains. Even the great mystics have testified to this curriculum. Teresa of Avila wrote of her interior castle, not as a gift revealed all at once, but as a mansion discovered room by room through trials and surrender. The Buddha taught that suffering was not the end, but the beginning of the path to liberation. That craving and attachment would dissolve only when we face them honestly again and again. And Jesus, the very embodiment of divine revelation on Urantia, walked not as a deity demanding homage, but as a brother, misunderstood, rejected, killed, and yet never bitter, never broken, always forgiving. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Luke 23, verse 34. These words are not just historical. They are planetary. They echo the very heart of the curriculum we live under. Earth is the planet where the divine becomes human, not in theory, but in blood, sweat, breath, and contradiction. And a result? Souls who awaken not because they were shown, but because they chose to remember through darkness. This, perhaps, is what makes Urantia holy. Not its holiness itself, but its hunger for it. Because in a universe saturated with clarity, Earth remains the sacred exception, the place where nothing is obvious, and therefore everything must be earned. And those who awaken here, not through prophecy or vision, but through perseverance and love, become the kind of souls the universe bows to. Not perfect, but purified. Not angelic, but forged. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Rumi. That field is not elsewhere. It is earth when the veil thins. It is the heart when it softens. It is you when you stop waiting for permission to wake up. The silence between the stars was never meant to punish you. It was crafted to draw your gaze inward, where the original connection still whispers. And if you listen closely enough, even now, even here, you might hear the universe itself breathing through your longing, not calling you away, but inviting you back. Chapter 5, The Son Who Descended. There's a kind of silence that precedes divine decisions. Not the absence of sound, but the fullness of intent. In that silence, far beyond galaxies and mortal understanding, a choice was made. A creator son would become a creature, not because he had to, because he loved. According to the Urantia Book, Michael of Nebadon, a son of the Eternal Father, chose Urantia, this small, quarantined, confused world, as the place to complete the final stage of his divine journey, the seventh bestowal. A creator son must live as one of his own creations in full, not as an observer, but as a participant, not to rule, but to understand from within, and in that understanding, to unify the divine and the finite forever. This wasn't a symbolic mission. It was the most real thing that ever happened on earth. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, wrote the Apostle John. But Urantia tells us more, that the word became vulnerable, that sovereignty itself came barefoot, that the architect of stars submitted to the limitations of skin, hunger, time, and betrayal. Why? Because to truly redeem a world, one must enter its confusion and walk it with open eyes. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, "Whenever there is a decline in righteousness and a rise in unrighteousness, I manifest myself." This is the same arc, the same pulse, in every age, in every tradition. But what happened on Urantia was more than intervention. It was integration. Jesus didn't descend as a God disguised. He came as truth revealed slowly, moment by moment, through growth, suffering, laughter, stillness. He was born not in a palace, but in a manger, not into power, but into humility. He learned language like any child. He scraped his knees. He listened. He wept. He worked with his hands, not for metaphor, but for survival. And with every ordinary step, the extraordinary drew nearer to us. God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by a process of subtraction, wrote Meister Eckhart. Jesus subtracted everything, glory, omniscience, divine privilege, until only humanity remained. And there, in that surrender, the divine didn't vanish. It became visible. He taught, not with riddles or lightning, but with seeds, fishnets, lilies, and lost coins. And the people, they didn't understand. How could they? The light was too familiar. They expected thunder. They found a man. But even that was the point. God did not come to be worshipped. He came to be known. To many, he was just a man, a carpenter, a teacher, a wanderer with kind eyes and strange words. No armies followed him. No temples were built in his name, not while he lived. And yet, every step he took bent the fabric of time. When Michael of Nebadon walked as Jesus of Nazareth, the universe watched in awe, not from superiority, but from reverence. Because this was not performance. This was presence. He did not preach dogma. He embodied reality. When he healed, he was showing the natural state of wholeness. When he forgave, he was undoing centuries of karmic binding. When he broke bread, God touched the texture of mortality and said, "It is good." If you can't see God in all, you can't see God at all, said Yogi Bhajan. Jesus saw God in everything, even in those who crucified him, especially in them. What made his ministry revolutionary was not only his words. It was that his identity was veiled even from himself until the right moment. He did not live from divinity. He grew into the full realization of it as a human would. The Urantia Book tells us this with sacred subtlety, that Jesus' understanding of his divine origin and mission unfolded gradually. Even God, when incarnated as man, had to remember, and in that remembering, he sanctified the human journey itself. Enlightenment is the ego's ultimate disappointment, wrote Adyashanti. Jesus had no ego left to disappoint. He surrendered it long before the cross, not in weakness, but in luminous self-emptying, what the Christian mystics would later call kenosis. When he stood before the masses, he didn't demand allegiance. He invited return to innocence, return to truth, return to the Father, not as an external deity, but as the living source already within. He said, "The kingdom of God is within you." Luke 17, verse 21. In Urantia, veiled, wounded, quarantined Urantia began to remember. His death was not the tragedy. The tragedy would have been if he had never come. But he did, not to erase karma, but to reveal what lies beneath it, a reality where sin, guilt, and separation are illusions folded within the greater truth of divine origin. He didn't come to start a religion. He came to complete a cycle, the final bestowal of a Creator's Son. And in doing so, he reconnected Earth to the circuits of spiritual communion. His life became a living bridge between time and eternity. He who sees me sees the one who sent me, he said. But only a few saw. The rest would awaken slowly, like embers stirring under ash. And that is still happening. Right now, in us, we are the continuation of that descent. We are the receivers of the light he reactivated. And though he left in body, he never left in essence. Michael still holds this world in his spiritual orbit, still walks among us, unseen but not unfelt. And the question is no longer whether he came. It's whether we will recognize him within ourselves. Chapter 6, The Invisible Master. Before the teachings, before the miracles, before the crowds gathered and the cross was raised, there was silence. Jesus spent more than 3/4 of his life in anonymity. No stage, no sermons, no spotlight, just quiet labor, daily decisions, family responsibilities, and a gradual unfolding of God inside a human form. Why? Because the divine does not rush revelation. The soul grows not by addition, but by subtraction, wrote the Christian mystic Meister Eckhart. And in those quiet years, Jesus subtracted everything that was not real. The Urantia Book describes this season of his life in sacred detail. How Jesus, the boy, watched his earthly father die. How he became head of a household before manhood. How he worked with wood and stone, not as a metaphor for teaching, but to feed his family. He did not perform miracles during those years. He performed something greater. He learned obedience through experience. He didn't float above life. He entered it fully. Sweep the floor, wash the bowls, make the tea, say the Zen masters. This is the way. And for Jesus, this was the way. The hidden curriculum of divinity, learning to wear dust without losing light. He traveled as a young man, not to convert, but to observe. In Damascus, Alexandria, Rome, he studied the ways of the world. He listened more than he spoke. He saw injustice, cruelty, and power corrupted. He also saw beauty in the common, a shepherd's kindness, a mother's laugh, a stranger's dignity. All of this, the weight and wonder of earth, he absorbed, not to judge it, but to understand it from within. Because no true spiritual teacher speaks from outside the world, they seek to guide. They walk it first. Jesus was not waiting to become a Christ. He was remembering how to carry God as man, without separation, without superiority, without escape. Be in the world, but not of it, says the Gospel of John. In those years, he became master of both. There's a kind of light that does not announce itself. It glows from within, quiet, patient, self-sustaining. Jesus became that kind of light. Before he was called Master, Rabbi, or Lord, he was simply a man of profound presence. He walked through markets, carried wood, exchanged coins, and said very little. But those who encountered him often left changed, without knowing why. When your presence speaks more loudly than your words, you have begun to remember, wrote Ram Dass. Jesus remembered, not in flashes, but in stillness, not through teachers, but through direct intimacy with the Father. The Urantia Book reveals that during his years of solitude, Jesus cultivated a relationship with God not based on belief, but identity. He spoke to the Father as one speaks to a trusted companion, not out of need, but out of union. He prayed not to ask. He prayed to align, not to change the world, but to become so rooted in love that the world could recognize itself through him. He had no scriptures in hand, yet his life became living scripture. No institution claimed him, yet the architecture of his soul was more precise than any doctrine. He did not run from suffering. He sat beside it. He offered no false comforts, only presence, the kind that says, "You are not alone, and you never were. I am a hole in a flute that the Christ's breath moves through. Listen to this music," wrote Hafiz. Jesus never needed to perform holiness. He had become the instrument of divine expression, and his every silence was a symphony. In his quiet compassion, he taught the greatest truth. God is not found in escape. God is found in embodiment. When he wiped tears, when he smiled at strangers, when he carried burdens that were not his own, he was doing more than being kind. He was revealing the pattern that would one day be called the way. As the Buddha once said, thousands of candles can be lit from a single flame, and the life of the flame will not be shortened. Jesus lived as that original flame, passing warmth without ever demanding praise. He belonged to no tribe. He upheld no ideology. His only allegiance was to truth, beauty, and goodness. The Divine Triad written not in books, but in the architecture of the soul. People who encountered him during these years didn't call him divine. They called him trustworthy, gentle, solid, real, and in a world of pretenders and power games, that was already a miracle. These were the years of becoming, not because he lacked something, but because the world needed time to be prepared, to receive what could not be understood intellectually, to feel what could only be recognized soul to soul. And when the time came, when the fire within him had become steady and full, he stepped forward not as a man with a message, but as the message itself. Chapter 7, The Inner Voice. There are voices that speak to the mind, and there are voices that speak to the soul. But deeper still, there's a voice that speaks without sound. It is not heard, it is recognized. This is the voice the Urantia Book calls the thought adjuster, a fragment of the universal Father himself, planted like a seed within the human soul. Not metaphor, not symbol, reality. You do not need to find God. He is already within you, waiting for your attention. This fragment is not passive. It is the most active force in your spiritual journey. It observes, guides, redirects, comforts, challenges, but never compels. It waits for your consent to awaken. There is a power within you that no one can touch, said Sri Ramana Maharshi. Find it, know it, be it. The thought adjuster is that power, not separate from God, but God localized inside you, tailor-made for your life, your path, your evolution. He does not speak in language. He speaks in impressions, sudden clarity, a knowing that wasn't there a moment before, a deep peace that does not match your circumstance. Sometimes it feels like conscience, sometimes like stillness, sometimes like an ache that pulls you away from comfort and towards something higher. But always, always, it is love seeking expression. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Rumi. The thought adjuster helps you dismantle those barriers gently, not by force, but through illumination, in the stillness of your heart. He whispers not what you want to hear, but what you most deeply need to remember. That you are not alone, that you are not broken, that the distance between you and God is not a journey. It is a forgetting, and he is the memory. The mystics have always hinted at this. Teresa of Avila called it the interior castle, a radiant core in the soul where God waits in loving silence. The Bhagavad Gita describes the indwelling self as the light of all lights beyond darkness, shining within the hearts of all. And the Urantia Book tells us, the thought adjuster is the absolute essence of an infinite being imprisoned within the mind of a finite creature. You are not a seeker of God. You are a host of him. And he is not waiting to be found. He is waiting to be trusted. What if your life is not leading you away from God, but drawing God deeper into you? The Urantia Book teaches that the ultimate purpose of human existence is not salvation as escape, but fusion with the thought adjuster. This is not poetic. It is literal. One day, in a moment outside of time, your soul and this fragment of divinity will merge, not as two lights meeting, but as one flame becoming indivisible. This is the destiny of every soul that chooses truth, not imposed, invited. The soul is ever striving to reach the one, its source, said Plotinus. And when it touches the divine, it remembers what it is. Fusion is that remembrance made permanent. It is the day when your identity is no longer shaped by fear or form, but by the quiet, eternal presence that has walked beside you since your first breath. The thought adjuster does not demand perfection. He seeks only your alignment, your willingness to surrender, not your freedom, but your false sense of separation. This path is not about escape from the body. It is not about fleeing the world. It is about bringing the divine fully into form. He who sees all beings in the self, and the self in all beings never turns away, says the Isha Upanishad. Fusion is the ultimate affirmation that your life, your joys, your failures, your tears, your longing was not wasted. It was the canvas upon which God painted himself into you. The adjuster does not rush you. He walks at the pace of love. At each fork in the road, he offers light, never command. When you fall, he waits. When you rise, he celebrates without noise. Even in your darkest moments, he does not retreat. He dwells in the cave of your heart, holding the pattern of what you are becoming. God sleeps in the rock, dreams in the plant, stirs in the animal, and awakens in man, said the mystic Sufi poet Inayat Khan. And in fusion, God no longer stirs or dreams. He lives in you as fully as you allow him. But here is the secret the world often forgets. Fusion is not the reward for the few. It is the destiny of all who choose love consistently. It is the outcome of faithfulness, not fame. Some may reach it after this life. Others may journey through 100 realms. But all who walk toward truth, with open hearts and surrendered wills, will reach the center, because the center was never somewhere else. It was within. The light that you are seeking in the world is the light that is already shining in you, said Yogananda. And the thought adjuster is that light's origin, its keeper, its silent flame. When fusion occurs, you do not become more divine. You become fully yourself, as you were always meant to be. And though this fusion transcends time, its preparation happens now. Every act of kindness, every surrender of ego, every choice to listen to love instead of fear, these are the brushstrokes of your eternal becoming. You are not just being guided by God. You are being shaped into a vessel he will one day fully inhabit, not from above, but from within. Chapter 8, The Brotherhood of Beings. We are not alone. It's not a hope. It's not a metaphor. It's a truth so radiant that, if you could feel it fully for one moment, it would dissolve all fear. According to the Urantia Book, the universe is populated with countless orders of spiritual beings, from the high administrators near paradise to the personal guardians walking beside every soul on earth. They are not here to rule. They are here to serve, and they do so not out of duty, but from a place of immeasurable joy. Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth, said Muhammad Ali. But the angels pay that rent with gratitude. These beings are not defined by wings and halos. They are frequencies of love, intelligence, guidance, perfected personalities whose nature is function and devotion. Some dwell in higher dimensions of cosmic organization. Others descend gently into time and space, their presence so subtle it feels like intuition, timing, or grace. Among them are the seraphim, angels of ministry. They are not ornamental. They are practical, aiding human minds in moral decisions, amplifying courage in times of confusion, whispering clarity when you are on the edge of surrender. Some seraphim are personal. They walk with you from your first breath to your last. Others assist civilization itself, guiding nations, influencing progress, nurturing planetary evolution. The soul attracts that which it secretly harbors, that which it loves, and also that which it fears, wrote James Allen. Seraphic beings respond not to prayerful words, but to sincere longing, to the magnetic pull of purpose. There are also the midway creatures, beings halfway between mortal and spiritual, invisible residents of Urantia. Neither ghost nor myth. They are assigned planetary tasks, often assisting with unseen aspects of human development. They understand us because they are near us in experience. They understand the higher beings because they are near them in form. They are bridges working without recognition in silence and faith. But beyond these, in the vast architecture of the universe, exist spiritual orders we cannot yet conceive. Messenger hosts who traverse galaxies with thought-speed missions. Administrators of constellations and systems. Perfected mortals called phenol leaders who have journeyed all the way to paradise and returned to serve those still on the path. The universe is alive with purpose, and the personalities within it are coordinated not by command, but by love aligned with divine will. In the spiritual world, hierarchy is not a pyramid of power. It is a river of function, says the Zohar. And every being, whether angelic or human, is a ripple in that river. You are not only watched, you are accompanied, not with judgment, but with profound compassion, with tireless, humble support, with a joy that sees not what you lack, but what you are becoming. These beings are not there to lift your burden for you. They are here to walk beside you while you lift it, so that when you rise, the victory is your own and eternally real. Because love never imposes. It walks with, it waits, it serves. To see the universe as it truly is, one must shift from the lens of control to the vision of cooperation. The Urantia Book reveals a truth rarely perceived from Earth, that the administration of the universe is not a chain of command, but a symphony of roles, each being playing its part in sacred harmony. There are no egos here, no ambition, only alignment with purpose and joy in fulfilling it. In the orchestra of the infinite, each note is essential, said Hazrat Inayat Khan. To miss your note is to disrupt the music of the whole. And yet, no one is punished for missing their note. They are guided back into tune with gentleness and persistence. This is the work of the celestial administration. At the highest levels are the Ancients of Days, overseeing super-universes with incomprehensible wisdom. They do not act arbitrarily. They interpret the will of paradise with unfailing equity and mercy. Beneath them flow hierarchies of divine beings, not climbing toward power, but pouring themselves downward in service. Cancellars and Union of Days, representing the Paradise Trinity. Vorendadics and Lanindex, administering galaxies and systems. Melchizedeks, those versatile teachers who respond wherever needed, sometimes even incarnating among mortals. They work together, not for individual recognition, but because joy increases with shared contribution. The Bhagavad Gita affirms, better is one's own dharma, though imperfect, than the dharma of another well performed. Gita 3:35. In the universe, every being is entrusted with a dharma, a role, a resonance, and when fulfilled, even in silence, it strengthens the whole. This principle also extends to ascendant mortals, beings who, like us, began in imperfection, but chose growth over stagnation, humility over self-glory. They rose not through belief, but through experience, faith, and trust in the divine path within. Some of these beings now serve in cosmic education. Some return to worlds like Urantia to assist evolving souls. Others, known as phenol leaders, have achieved fusion with their thought adjusters and now function in pure will alignment with the Universal Father. They are what we are becoming. Not angels, not exalted rulers, but complete beings, eternally committed to the upliftment of others. When the soul is full of light, it does not seek to shine, wrote Thomas Merton. It becomes a window through which others may see. This is the way of the brotherhood, to become windows, not mirrors, to reflect not their own brilliance, but the source that flows through all things. In Urantia, broken, veiled, yearning Urantia is not forgotten by this great family. If anything, our isolation has intensified their love, their vigilance, their desire to assist without overstepping the laws of soul freedom. They do not fix our mistakes. They surround us with opportunities to grow through them. They do not rescue. They empower, because this universe is not made for escape. It is made for emergence. Every time you choose peace over reaction, forgiveness over resentment, presence over distraction, you are collaborating with them. You become, for a moment, a conscious participant in the symphony. And as more humans begin to live this way, with inner stillness, with spiritual curiosity, with reverent love, Urantia, too, will step more clearly into its place among the stars, not as a fallen world, but as a healed instrument in the universal orchestra of beings. Chapter 9, The Long Path of Ascension. Death is not the end. It is a transition in perception, a shedding of density, a movement from shadow to subtler form. In the teachings of the Urantia Book, death marks not annihilation, but initiation. When a mortal body is laid down, the soul, preserved and guided by the thought adjuster, enters the Urantia state, a new phase of identity, bridging the physical and the spiritual. This is where the ascension begins. What the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly, said Richard Bach. The soul does not awaken alone. Upon death, a seraphic transport, a luminous being, receives the soul, or more precisely, what survives. Your soul essence, your moral choices, your spiritual impressions, and the adjuster's record of your inner life. And then you awaken, not in heaven, but on the first mansion world, the beginning of an eternal journey inward and upward. These mansion worlds are not reward or punishment. They are educational environments, tuned to the vibrational needs of soul growth. The first world heals, the second aligns, the third deepens understanding. And so it goes, world after world, each refining your awareness, expanding your capacity to love, and dissolving residue from the material life. In the realm beyond, says the Tibetan Book of the Dead, clarity comes not from seeking, but from surrender. This surrender is not passive. It is the letting go of every false identity, so the soul can begin to shine without distortion. Here, the memories of earth are not erased. They are integrated. Lessons not learned in life become new opportunities. No failure is final, only unfinished. You are not judged by a throne. You are seen by the very presence that has always walked with you, your thought adjuster, who knows not only what you did, but why. And this knowing is not condemnation. It is clarification. As you ascend through these worlds, your soul is slowly transformed from reactive personality into co-creative being. The ego dissolves. The essence remains. You become what you were always meant to be, not a perfected version of your earthly self, but a new synthesis of humanity and divinity. The soul grows by removing all that is not soul, said the anonymous author of The Cloud of Unknowing. And this cloud is slowly lifted realm by realm until light becomes your natural state. There is no rush. There is no clock. The Father is not waiting with a stopwatch. He is waiting with patience beyond time, because every soul that chooses to walk this path becomes not only restored, but restorative to the universe. And yet this is only the beginning. The mansion worlds are the threshold of eternity, the vestibule of a temple so vast that time itself bends in reverence. Beyond them lies the greater climb, and that is where we now turn. Beyond the mansion worlds lies an ascending spiral of reality, not merely spatial, but dimensional, where the soul is prepared to meet eternity as a conscious participant. The Urantia Book describes the next phase as movement through system headquarters, constellation capitals, and local universe centers, each world more refined, more radiant, more aligned with divine law. This is not a race. It is pilgrimage through light. The soul no longer stumbles, it flows. Not because perfection has been attained, but because resistance has been released. The higher worlds are not to be reached by movement through space, wrote Sri Aurobindo, but by the soul's expansion into its own divinity. This expansion unfolds step by step. In each sphere, the soul meets new beings, new teachers, new harmonies, not to be worshipped, but to be awakened by. Every universe station is a school of the infinite, designed with precision and compassion, to reveal to the soul its next layer of truth. The journey is often described as long, but it is not measured in time, it is measured in readiness. For many, this journey takes ages. For a few, those whose surrender is total, it may move swiftly. The goal is not to arrive quickly, but to arrive whole. From the local universe, the soul is guided toward the minor and major sectors of the superuniverse, and ultimately to its capital world, where the soul becomes fully spiritualized. Here, personality identity is not lost. It is divinely stabilized. And from this high station, the soul enters Havona, the central, perfect creation. Havona is not a realm of trial, but of recognition. Its billion worlds are spheres of divine artistry, not to be conquered, but contemplated. The soul at last enters the garden it always carried within, wrote St. John of the Cross. In Havona, you do not strive. You resonate. You meet beings who have never fallen. You feel purity not as something foreign, but as your own remembered nature. And from Havona, the final path opens. Paradise, the center of all creation, the timeless isle, the seat of the universal Father. Here, the soul stands not as servant, not as petitioner, but as child come home. There is no fear. There is only the recognition of original union. The Father does not speak with words. He embraces with presence. And in that embrace, something irreversible occurs. The thought adjuster, the divine fragment who walked with you from your first breath, now fuses with your soul forever. You're no longer becoming. You are. The Atman and the Brahman are one, declares the Upanishads. And the soul knows this not as doctrine, but as direct realization. This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of eternal service. Now, as a Fina leader, a being of perfected will, ready to assist others across the far-flung worlds of time and space. The climb was never for you alone. It was for those behind you, for the universe itself, for the music of God waiting to be sung through your experience. You have not reached the top. You have reached origin. And there, in paradise, you finally understand. God was never separate. You were never unworthy. And love, only love, was real the entire time. Chapter 10. The Future of Urantia. The universe is patient. It watches, not with judgment, but with curious compassion, as worlds like Urantia find their way through darkness toward light. Ours is not a typical evolutionary planet. Urantia bears the scars of rebellion, the delay of truth, the confusion of isolation. But scars are not shameful. They are stories of survival and seeds of future greatness. Darkness is not the opposite of light. It is the womb from which light is born, said Teilhard de Chardin. According to the Urantia Book, Urantia's spiritual quarantine is slowly lifting. Circuit by circuit, influence by influence, the higher realms are reconnecting, preparing the planet for greater revelation and cosmic participation. But not through spectacle, through slow, inner awakening. This is the age of quiet transformation, of scattered souls hearing the still voice within and responding. There is no global spiritual system that will save us. What's coming is a planetary network of awakened individuals, souls guided by inner certainty, divine intimacy, and loving action. Already, we see the signs. The hunger for direct experience over doctrine, the decline of fear-based religion, the rise of integrative spirituality, mystical science, planetary consciousness. This is not rebellion. It is recollection. The divine plan is not behind us. It is emerging through us. One who is awake shines radiantly by day and night, says the Dhammapada. These luminous ones are already among us, unknown, unsung, but deeply in tune with the will of the Father. And this is how planetary transformation begins. Not from the outside in, but from the inside out. As more humans surrender to truth, more light anchors into the collective field. And as the light grows, new forms of cooperation will emerge, not forced by governments, but inspired by spiritual maturity. Education will shift from information to wisdom. Healing will move from fixing the body to restoring harmony of soul. Technology will become a servant of consciousness, not a substitute for it. We will learn, again, that being is greater than having. And from this new ground, Urantia's higher destiny will unfold. A time will come when science and spirituality shall walk hand in hand, said Sri Yukswar. That time is not a date. It is a threshold of readiness. And it begins now. Urantia's wounds are deep, but so is its calling. The Urantia Book tells us this world, once isolated by rebellion and delayed in its spiritual evolution, is not cursed, but consecrated by the life of Michael of Nebadon, who chose this planet for his final bestowal. Earth has been eternally marked by divine intimacy. It is no longer merely a world of delay. It is now a world of destiny. The quarantine will not last. And when it ends, Urantia will be reintegrated into the circuits of the larger universe, not as a liability, but as a testament to divine patience and evolutionary triumph. Like a scar that glows with healing light, Earth's history will become instructional, not shameful. Future beings from other worlds may one day study Urantia not because it was perfect, but because it was faithful. Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars, wrote Khalil Gibran. Earth's collective soul has been tempered in fire, and it is becoming something rare. A world that learns not through favor, but through freedom. Not through privilege, but through inner revelation. This is what spiritual planetary maturity looks like. In the distant future, across millennia, perhaps more, Earth may enter the era of light and life, the final evolutionary stage outlined in the Urantia Book. What does that look like? Global cooperation rooted not in politics, but in spiritual kinship. Leadership motivated by wisdom and service. Education centered in soul development, planetary stewardship, and cosmic citizenship. Religion transformed into personal communion with the divine presence, the adjuster within. Science as an ally of spirit, and culture as a vehicle for beauty, truth, and goodness. This is not a theocracy. It is a planetary consciousness rooted in individual enlightenment. The evolution of the world is completed in the evolution of the individual, wrote Sri Aurobindo. And the individual is awakening. Not perfectly, not rapidly, but inevitably, because the divine fragment within each human being, the thought adjuster, is unceasing. And as more souls surrender to its guidance, the planet will tilt gently toward its higher calling. There will come a time when Earth sends ambassadors to other worlds, not to convert, but to share its hard-won wisdom. A time when future beings say, "This is the world where God walked," not just in one man, but in many. Urantia may become known as the planet where confusion gave birth to compassion, where delay created depth, where rebellion led not to ruin, but to reformation of spirit. The wound is the place where the light enters you, wrote Rumi. And Earth is that wound, and that light. In the far horizon of time, this world may become a teaching sphere, a planet of pilgrimage, where ascendant souls from younger worlds come to understand the paradox of imperfection birthing divinity. We will teach not because we are the most advanced, but because we have remembered what it means to forget and still choose love. That is the destiny before us. But it begins not with institutions, not with divine intervention. It begins now, in you, in your decision to live aligned with the still voice within, to choose truth even when no one sees, to walk gently, to serve freely, to listen deeply, because the future of Urantia is not built in decades. It is built in moments of courage, in every unseen act of mercy, in every surrender breath. This is how planets evolve, one soul at a time, one light at a time. Let there be light, and let it begin in us. Chapter 11, The Eternal Choice. Before creation ever began, the divine made one solemn promise. I will not enter where I am not invited. And so, even with all the love of the universe, God waits, not passively, but with infinite respect for the soul's sovereign will. The Urantia Book makes this clear. God does not control. God guides from within through the thought adjuster, patiently, persistently, but never intrusively. And so, at the center of cosmic destiny lies a quiet mystery. The human soul must say yes, not once, but continually, not with words, but with life. You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens, said Rumi. The decision to align with divine will is not made in lightning. It is made in daily surrender, in forgiving when it's easier to harden, in pausing when it's easier to react, in trusting the voice within even when it costs comfort. This is what it means to choose God. But make no mistake, this choice is not between reward and punishment. It is the choice between living as illusion or living in truth, between drifting through reaction or awakening to participation in the Father's eternal plan. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, wrote Carl Jung. And your true identity is not something you create. It is something you remember and reclaim through consent. In the Urantia Book, The adjuster patiently cultivates the soul toward this awareness. He does not force fusion. He waits for readiness. The moment the human will become reliably God-seeking. And even then, he does not rush. Because real union requires real freedom. The saints and sages knew this. God cannot be found in noise or restlessness, said Saint Teresa of Avila. Look into your own depths. The divine guest is waiting. This waiting is not absence. It is invitation. And when the soul begins to answer, not with perfection, but with sincerity, the universe itself begins to respond. There is no spiritual shortcut to this choice. It cannot be inherited, performed, or earned. It must be discovered through personal longing. And once found, once truly chosen, it becomes a flame that cannot be extinguished. The moment you desire God above all else, that is when he is already yours, said Ramana Maharshi. This is the sacred consent, not dramatic, not loud, but eternally significant. Once the soul begins to say yes, the universe responds, not with spectacle, but with a subtle but unmistakable shift in the fabric of one's inner world. You begin to live not toward God, but from him. This is the mystery of becoming eternal, not by reaching a destination, but by entering into cooperation with the divine. The Tao does nothing, and yet leaves nothing undone, says Lao Tzu. Likewise, the adjuster does not impose. He flows, guiding decisions, illuminating insight, dissolving inner conflict with quiet presence. The more we choose alignment, the more his influence becomes our natural atmosphere. Thoughts clarify, motives soften, purpose emerges not from ambition, but from attunement. In this communion, your life becomes not louder, but truer. You cease to strive to be spiritual. You begin to simply be available to the Father's will. This is not passivity. This is divine partnership. As the Urantia Book reveals, the adjuster is not merely a guide. He is a co-creator of your eternal soul form. Together, you build the pattern that will carry you beyond time. The wise grieve neither for the living nor the dead, says the Gita 2:11. For never was there a time you did not exist. And so you begin to live as one who will never cease to be, not with arrogance, but with humility so profound it becomes joy. You no longer act to survive. You act to radiate. Your thoughts are no longer private. They are currents in the sea of cosmic purpose. Thomas Merton once wrote, "To be a saint means to be myself, and your true self, purified of illusion, bathed in surrender, is already aligned with divine love. You begin to bless without effort, forgive without condition, and serve not as obligation, but as overflow. The eternal choice, once made sincerely, transforms every mundane moment into a sacred act. Washing dishes becomes a sacrament. Listening becomes prayer. Stillness becomes participation in universal equilibrium. And as more souls enter this state, the light on the planet rises. Slowly, invisibly, steadily. This is how Urantia begins to reflect paradise, not by escaping the world, but by bringing God fully into it through lived consent. You do not wait for eternity. You become eternal now. And though your body may one day return to dust, your soul, joined with the divine, will continue its journey with purpose, with peace, with presence. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be, said Lao Tzu. And what you might be is already whispered within you by the voice that never leaves. All that remains is your response. Yes. Chapter 12, Living the Revelation. Spiritual awakening is not the escape from life. It is the deepening into it. The true mystic does not float above the world. She walks through it with opened eyes, seeing God in sink water, subway strangers, unfinished tasks, and silent hours. The Urantia Book has shown us galaxies, angels, and eternal destinies. But none of it matters unless we can live it here, in this body, on this earth, in this moment. Because the kingdom is not found in visions. It is found in attention. There is no task too small that cannot be done with great love, said Mother Teresa. And Brother Lawrence, the humble Carmelite monk, wrote, "We ought not to be weary of doing little things for the love of God. He regards not the greatness of the work, but the love with which it is performed." This is the secret of practicing the presence. You do not need to perform spirituality. You only need to notice God already present in the way the sunlight lands on your hands, in the breath you forgot you were breathing, in the compassion that arises before your mind has time to resist. Living the revelation begins with devotional attention. It is not dramatic. It is faithful. Each act, sweeping the floor, making tea, holding space for another, becomes a sacrament when done with God for God, in God. The great truths of the universe are not demanding. They are waiting to be recognized in your next conversation, your next silent pause, your next act of kindness with no audience. When we walk, we are arriving with every step, said Thich Nhat Hanh. Spiritual maturity is not about arrival. It is about presence. The thought adjuster does not guide only in moments of silence and prayer. He walks with you through traffic, through grief, through confusion, inviting you to bring heaven into the heart of your circumstance. The spiritual path is not separate from your life. It is your life transformed by a new way of seeing. You do not need more. You need only to remember, again and again, that you're never alone. You carry the infinite within you. Now you are simply learning to walk in rhythm with Him. Once the truth has been seen, not intellectually, but with the eyes of the soul, you cannot return to unconsciousness. You may forget, stumble, resist, but the flame within has been lit, and it will never fully go out. Living the revelation means you no longer serve self-image, ego, or fear. You serve the presence of God within and the sacredness of others, whether they see it or not. We are all just walking each other home, said Ram Dass. The awakened soul becomes a quiet lamp, not by preaching, but by being. Your kindness, your listening, your honesty, these are now your scripture. Your forgiveness becomes your temple, and your life, lived with reverence, becomes a testimony that no doctrine can match. The Bhagavad Gita reminds us, perform your duty equipoised, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. 248. In divine alignment, success is not the goal. Sincerity is. You serve not to change the world, but to bring your light into the world as it is. And what is this light? It is the fragrance of a soul surrendered to the will of the Father. It is the clarity that moves without resistance. It is the peace that does not demand circumstances change. You become someone in whom others feel safe, not because you solve their pain, but because your presence no longer adds to it. This is what it means to embody the adjuster's influence. Not perfection, but availability. Saint Teresa of Avila wrote, Christ has no body now on earth but yours. Yours are the hands with which He blesses the world. And so the revelation becomes bodied through you. You walk gently, speak truth, offer silence where silence heals. Offer words when they are love. You become a lighthouse, not needing to chase storms, but standing still, radiating what you carry. The light you live may never be noticed on stages, but it will soften your family, your friends, your community in ways you may never fully understand. Because the adjuster does not require visibility. He requires only cooperation. To live the revelation is not to wait for heaven. It is to let heaven enter this moment through your willingness to be led. And when you forget, as you will, you return. You begin again. This too is the way. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing. God never changes, wrote Teresa of Avila. Patience obtains all things, and the patient soul becomes transparent to eternity. Not someday. Now, the cosmos has unfolded over trillions of years. Stars have died to make your body. Divine intelligences have labored to preserve your path, also that you might say yes to love and live from it. This is the revelation. Now it is yours to live. All revelations end in silence, not because they fail to explain, but because they bring you to a place where explanation is no longer needed. You have heard stories of angels, stars, sacred beings, and the indwelling fragment of the infinite. But now we ask not for more. We ask for stillness, the sacred space into which all of this was always flowing. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46, verse 10. And the mystics knew this was not a command. It was an invitation to come home. The Urantia Book offers vastness, but its vastness is not to overwhelm you. It is to bring you back to the place within where the entire cosmos has always lived. You are not small. You are the meeting point between time and eternity. You're not lost. You are being whispered to in every breath by a voice that has never abandoned you. The soul is not in the body is in the soul, wrote Meister Eckhart. And the universe is not out there, it is inside your surrender. This silence is not absence, it is containment, the holding of all paradox, all love, all becoming. In your deepest stillness, you already know. There is no map. There is only the walk. There is no answer. There is only presence. There is no separate God. There is only God and your willingness to live from Him. You do not need to hold on to the teachings. You need only to trust what they've awakened. That trust is what becomes your guide. That inner, yes, quiet, humble, enduring, becomes your true compass. And so, let the teachings fall away, like scaffolding removed when a temple is complete. What remains is not information, is a way of being. You have heard the words. You have seen glimpses of the celestial architecture, the ministry of angels, the eternity waiting beyond time, the thought adjuster whispering within. Now, the universe hands it all back to you, not as a burden, but as a torch. You carry the light now. The lamp does not shine for itself, wrote Hazrat Inayat Khan, but to give light to others who have lost their way. You are that lamp. And even if you doubt your flame, the Father does not, because He gave you that light, because He is that light, and it has never left you. The voice within, the still, patient presence, is your eternal companion, not just a guide, but to walk with you wherever you go. He is not waiting for your perfection. He is waiting for your openness. Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open? Asks Rumi. You are not confined. You are being invited again and again into freedom. And that freedom is not in grand gestures. It is in the next quiet moment, the next difficult kindness, the next unnoticed act of love. You will forget. You will fall. And still, the light within you will not go out, because it is not yours to protect. It is the Father's to sustain. All you must do is return. Return in breath, in prayer, in stillness. And you will find Him there, as always, as never left. Walk as if you're kissing the earth with your feet, said Thich Nhat Hanh, and let your whole life become a prayer without words, a journey without striving, a homecoming without distance. You are not here to prove the revelation. You are here to embody it, not to convert others, but to be so deeply rooted in truth that your presence becomes sanctuary. This is how the world is healed, not all at once, but one steady soul at a time. You may never know what your light has done, but heaven will, and it will smile, because in choosing love again and again, you have become part of the great restoration. You have chosen to remember who you are, and now the universe walks with you because you walk with him. If you knew who walks beside you on this path that you have chosen, fear would be impossible, says A Course in Miracles. And so, beloved soul, walk slowly, love deeply, shine quietly. You are enough. The light is already within you. Let it become the world. If you felt something awaken within, if you heard the whisper you always knew was there, then this journey has only just begun. Let this truth not end in thought, but begin in life, and let your life become the next revelation. And if this journey moved you, please share your light with us. Comment below where you're listening from, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone you love. New videos every day to nourish the soul. Until then, walk in light, live in truth, and know you are never alone.